Welcome to the Leader's Journey podcast. I'm your host, Joel Gunn, and today I have with me Rudy, the CEO of CPS. Thanks for being here.
Nice to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a real honor to have you on the show. My wife actually heard you speak at a conference back at the beginning of the year, and she said, I don't know if you could get Rudy on your podcast, but I think you'd be a great guest. So that's what started all this.
Well, I'm glad I gave her something to remember me by.
Yeah. So, the title of the podcast is The Leader's Journey.
Yeah.
Mind sharing just a little bit of your story? How'd you end up from Corpus Christi to CEO of CPS in San Antonio?
Yeah. Well, I will tell you, the journey never ends where you think it's going to. So I'll start our conversation there. I was, a young man in the west side of Corpus Christi. Grew up with my grandparents in a multi-generation family, like a lot of Latino kids do. My parents were teenagers when I was born. I remember, my high school. Some of my high school teachers remembered me as a baby when my parents would take me to school with them and leave me with them during their teachers' off periods while they went to school. I mean, that was a thing back in the day.
That's cool.
And, poor kid. I mean, you don't realize you're poor when you're in it. You got love and come from a good family and, had a lot of love, and that was enough. But went to an inner city school, Roy Miller High School down in Corpus Christi, graduated and went to UT. Austin, Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering. There got me into the utility space. I would do summer internships every summer, trying to go make some money, to save up for the next year. So until I got broke again. But I would literally pack all my stuff into a 1984 Monte Carlo and drive to Dallas and find an apartment for 3 months while I worked up there, and then I'd come back the next year and finish up. So, so there was really no rhyme or reason for me to enter the utility industry other than my internship program. And I worked for a good company called TXU. They don't exist anymore. They broke up, and there are multiple companies now, but it's the largest electric utility in the state of Texas. And got some great opportunities to learn there. Was with them until they got bought out by private equity, and kind of made a couple of stops from there, and then found myself, getting recruited to come work for CPS Energy. And, everything kind of happens for a reason. And, and I think my pathway leading me to CPS Energy is ultimately what gave me an opportunity to be here.
At what point in your life did you start to realize you might have some leadership potential?
I think I've always been a leader. I mean, I was, student class president and then did all the things, and, was a leader, I think, in college with my fraternity, and in the internship program. I was actually one of 3 leaders that, that helped students, get into the program and teach folks as we went through. I've always been a learner. I've always been open to, recognizing there are things I don't know that I need to learn. And so the great thing about the company I worked for is they had a pretty good program moving you around a lot. And so I was in customer service, and I was an engineer in operations, and, moved from there to a business planning function, and moved from there to regulatory. And really that regulatory engineering job was where I think my career kind of took off, because I got to lead some really significant projects at the Public Utility Commission. We were deregulating the electric industry in that time, in the late 90s, early 2000s. So I worked on a number of projects that helped do that, from an industry standpoint, that helped accomplish that. And the key to getting to this seat, you can lead an organization once you learn how they make money. Once you understand how they bring revenue in and how that runs the business. And the regulatory opportunity I had really kind of helped with my understanding of the business.
A lot of people want to be the boss because they think it comes with perks, and it comes with, well, if I can be the boss, then I do whatever I want to do.
Yep.
What was your early motivation for wanting to be in leadership?
I don't know that I ever thought about it, from the perks standpoint, I've always been good with people. And from that standpoint, when you love people, then you find a way into being a leader of people. I was the youngest executive at my company at 33 years old. They made me a director. And that's kind of where that process started for me. And really, until I came here, I led small teams. I was a lobbyist for a bit. I went from regulatory to governmental affairs. And so I had a team of lobbyists that worked for me as an internal governmental affairs manager, back in those days. And so it really wasn't until I came. And so you always lead small teams when you're in the governmental affairs space. But the public policy education I got working at the Texas legislature, and then ultimately, up in Congress at the U.S. Capitol, taught me what other elements of the business that helped round me out, right? And so when I came here, it wasn't until our second CEO that I worked for while I was here remembered that I had an engineering degree. And she's like, we're going to put you over operations as distribution operations, leader, where I had like 1,500 people working for me. And that's really, I think, the scale, helped prepare me for becoming a CEO. So I always tell people, if you don't like people, then you don't need to be a people leader. You have to fundamentally like people. You have to fundamentally want to engage with folks, get to know them on a personal level. And I think that's what really kind of got me prepared for the CEO role, is just I've always been, relationships have always mattered to me.
I heard in my 20s, some wealthy business leader, he said something, I forget the exact quote, but it was along the lines of, you will only be as successful as people want you to be. And his whole point was, if people don't see you and value you and the fact that you value them, they're the ones that allow you to go to those higher levels of leadership. Would you agree with that, or would you?
Yes, to a certain point, I agree with that. There was a leader that hired me here by the name of Dole Beneby. He continues to be a mentor of mine. At least I consider him a mentor. He put the idea in my head that I could be a CEO. I as a young kid from the West Corpus Christi, that wasn't my dream. My dream was to just achieve as high as I could achieve. And I was a VP in that moment when we had that conversation. I'll never forget it. And and he asked me the question. He says, "Rudy, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I gave him the same BS answer that anybody. I want to add value. I want to do what I can to continue to grow. Blah blah blah. He's like, "Come on, man, quit BSing me." He says, "You want the corner office or not?" And until that second, I had never really considered the idea that was possible. There's no CEOs that look like me. There still aren't. There's a handful of Latino CEOs in this business across the country, and I know every one of them. So for me, he put it in my head that I had the ability to get there. I just had to work to get there. Now I will tell you, not everybody, once you get there, is going to be a supporter.
Sure.
And you have to be strong enough to do the job anyway. Like, if I worried about who supported me and who didn't support me as CEO of CPS Energy, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. And I don't care about the folks that don't support me. I'm CEO anyway. So my job is to do the best I can possibly do for my employees and for our customers.
You mentioned a mentor. Did you have a lot of mentors through life, or?
I've had tons of mentors, and again, the great thing about the internship program that I was a part of is it really taught the students in those programs the value of mentorship. And I'll go back. I mean, there are elements of who I am as a person that my grandfather on my dad's side taught me. He was a people person. He was a head of a savings and loan back in those days, and so he knew everybody in town. It was like, going around. I go to a breakfast, place with my grandfather, and it was like walking in with a celebrity, because back in those days, he was the only banker in town loaning money to small businesses that couldn't get loans everywhere else. So every taqueria in town was a customer of his. My grandpa, on my mom's side, my grandpa Cavada, he worked hard. He was a foreman at a local refinery. He got up, 37 and a half years, never missed a day at work. So my work ethic I got from him. My dad taught me about humility and how you need to be a humble leader when you get to places where you have influence, because that keeps you grounded. So never forgetting where I come from comes from my dad. But everywhere along the way, I've had mentors. I've had mentors who taught me the business. They taught me, how utilities make money. I've had mentors who taught me how to be an operational leader. I've had mentors who taught me the relationship, that you have to have a relationship strategy with people in order to be an effective leader. And then I've had leaders that have given me unbelievable opportunities that this opportunity would not have come hadn't it not been for those, moments where I was stretched, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in mentorship. I mentor, tons of employees inside and outside the organization. Anybody who wants to have a conversation with me about their careers or about leadership or about whatever might help them, if I care about them, I'm going to give them some time.
I've observed two types of mentors, and maybe there's more, but the one is the mentor that really invest one-on-one time or small group or small team time. The other is that just make sure you're in the right place at the right time. Did you have both types of mentors, or even a third type?
I have had both types of mentors. I've had people give me advice about, hey, if you start here and this is really where you want to be, then you're going to have to take some. It's never a straight path. It's always a jagged path. And in one instance, when I left TXU, I literally took a 50% cut in pay and took a lateral position to go down to work for the city of Corpus Christi, because I recognized I needed experience at the federal level. I'd lobbied Austin, never lobbied DC. So, because of that, this opportunity would not have come. So I do think you have mentors that explain that mentality that helps ensure you're in the right place at the right time. I think there are mentors that take interest in people. You share common ground, you develop a relationship, and so you want good things for them. I've mentored people who are struggling, quite frankly, with their careers, that in some cases left the organization because this wasn't the right place for them. And so, mentoring isn't all, rainbows and unicorns all the time. In some cases, it's some really tough conversations about what they're missing that's holding them back from being everything they can be. So I think there are all kinds of ways you can mentor people. I've mentored people out, from here outside of work that are struggling with their marriage or that are dealing with a difficult situation, with their kid or with, a family member that, are really struggling with their mental health. I've always been very grounded in my faith. My wife and I have done marriage, retreats with our church. And so I take an interest in people because I can tell when somebody isn't right, when there's something off that's holding them back. And so there's mentoring in your private life too that I think is important if you're paying attention.
Yeah. You said something a moment ago about you took a 50% pay cut. I don't care what generation you're from. The baby boomers, or they might have been more open to something like that. But certainly the younger generations, that probably just short-circuited their brain. Because we're always looking, it's got to always be better. It sounds like you've led a very blessed life, but I suspect there's been some ups and downs.
Sure.
Any that you care to share?
Well, I mean, look, even in taking the CEO role here, I got criticized for the salary I agreed to because people thought that I'm, selling myself short. I have never made a decision based on money, not one time in my life. And every time that good things happen to me, I believe it's because of that fact. So for me, what I need and maybe what somebody else needs are two different things. As long as I can pay my bills, put food on the table, can send my kids to college, and I've got a little extra, to do the things I want to do, man, I'm blessed. So I'm never gonna get hung up on whether or not somebody's paying me $15,000 or $20,000 less than, I think I deserve. You know what? if this is the right place for me, then the money stuff will take care of itself. And I do think people get too hung up on money. I have seen folks leave our organization thinking they're moving to a better opportunity for money. And 6 months, a year down the line, they regretted it. And so I always ask people that question: are you sure this is the opportunity you think it is? Have you really thought through the long-term, implications of staying with CPS Energy and seeing what happens here? Are you happy? If you're not happy, then go. But don't. I always coach people: don't make decisions based on money, because it's just short-sighted. How much is $5,000-$10,000? If you're making $100,000, a year, is that really gonna change your quality of life? No, give you a little more flexibility, but after taxes, it's nothing, right? So I don't know. I think people focus too much on it.
Especially nothing if you go into a worse culture,
right? Absolutely.
Or longer
and
hours.
You never know what you're getting into until you walk through those doors.
As you've mentored people, I'm assuming there's been some people that ignored your input.
Sure.
How do you process that?
Well, everybody's got to make their own decisions. I'm big on accountability, and if you make a decision that doesn't work out, then again, the best advice I can give you, it's only advice, and it's up to you what you do with it. And so I don't necessarily ever take it. I don't take things personally when I give. So I give my sons advice all the time that they discount. So everybody's got to make their own decisions. Everybody's got to be accountable for themselves. And, again, just because they leave the organization, I'm going to help them anyway. I mean, I had a mentee of mine that didn't leave the organization on great terms, and I still want good things for them. I'll write letters of recommendation for people and help them move on to, because everybody's got to feed their families and do what they need to do. So, I don't get too hung up on people who don't take my advice. I give it freely, and it's up to them to do what they want with it.
How do you avoid overcommitting or burnout or spreading yourself too thin?
There's one way I know to do this job, and that's with everything I have. And it's the reason why most CEOs have a beginning and an end. Because if you're going to do it the way that feels comfortable to you, maybe not everybody is going to be as energetic in as many places as I am on a daily basis. My calendar is pretty crazy, but I know that if I'm going to be the best CEO I can be, this is the pace. And you're not going to find me ever complaining about the 15 meetings that might be on my calendar any given day. That's the job. And so you can't ask for something. You can't ask for an opportunity to have a chance to be great at something and not be willing to put in whatever it takes to be great. And so that's how I look at my opportunity here. There's going to come a time where my time has come and it's over, and I'm okay with that. And I'll be gone way before anybody wants me gone from CPS Energy. But as long as I'm here, I'm going to give everything I have. And and that's why for me, I think my leaders will tell you I have been very, very committed to setting the right example when it comes to work-life balance. Doesn't mean I'm not going to work 10, 12, 15 hours a day when it's necessary, but I don't call my employees after hours if it's unnecessary. I don't set up meetings, at nights, on weekends, when I think they should be with their families. If there's an emergency, as there is most times in the utility business, we're going to deal with that. The storm comes through, we're going to do the work it takes to get our customers back on. But I'm not going to have you on the phone when you're out trying to coach your kids' soccer game, right? I want you to be present with your family, because you're going to be a better employee for me if you feel like I'm respectful about your time. So I think there's a way you can do both. I strive every day to try to be reasonable about what I'm asking of my employees. And I know when a job's getting done and when a job's not getting done. So if we can manage our work and you can be with your family when you need to be, that's a place I want to work.
Win-win, yeah.
Right? So that's kind of how I look at that. I mean, I'm going to go as hard as I can go for as long as my health allows me to. That's the job.
How is that? You said you and your wife have gone to marriage retreats. How has she embraced your lifestyle?
I could not do what I do on a daily basis if I didn't have, a spouse that, that was as supportive as my wife Emily is. To get right now, we're actually, as if I didn't have enough to do, we agreed to be community co-chairs for the 2025 United Way community campaign. It's a $47 million commitment.
Wow.
I certainly had something I don't want to screw up, but for the first time, my wife and I are doing it together.
Fun.
Because I think the signal that sends to the community, I think is a good one, and hopefully will show up as we start tallying up the totals. But no, she's been great. She knows that I can't be a present CEO and feel pressure about where else I might need to be. I'm where she wants me to be when I need to be there, and when I need to be CEO, I'm CEO. And I think the two versions of me are really compatible because I have a wife who understands the pressure I'm under. The only person who ever hears everything that's going on in my world is her. Good days, it's her. Bad days, it's her. And it's important to have somebody that you can lean on like that.
Do you feel like you're present in the moments with her?
I try really hard to be. Yeah. I'm not always, as probably as attentive as I should be, but I try really hard to balance out, the email responding and stuff that I have to do on a responsiveness is at the very top of my list. When somebody is trying to get to me, whether it's a text or an email or a call or whatever, I'm available. And I think that's served the organization well and served my brand of leadership well. But there are, we'll go on vacation and my work phone stays, in the hotel room while we go out and try to do something, because we have a real good system here where my leaders are present when I'm not available. Sure. And you have to find a way to turn it off when it's necessary. And I think we've reached a pretty good balance.
Good for you. How much does trust come into play with your leadership team?
100%. It's everything. We have what we call a one team mindset here that is part of our core values, and nobody is more important than anybody else. I'm the least important person of all, and and we try to reach consensus on big decisions, because whether we end up where you want us to or we end up somewhere else, we talk through it so everybody understands why we ended up where we ended up, and we move forward. And so I don't know any other way to be but accountable, to act with integrity, to be transparent in the way that we're doing things, because that's how you build community trust. And and I expect authenticity. You could tell, you would be able to tell immediately if I said something that you knew wasn't real. Well, guess what? Your employees know that too. The community knows that too. So I think my team would tell you that whether I think it's what you want to hear me say or not, I'm going to tell you the truth and tell you what I really think. And because of that, I think we've maintained, we've built a lot of trust in both internally and external of the organization, because I think people recognize that we're being real about what we think. And so trust is everything.
How do you encourage that, though? Somebody comes to your team and they've been in a toxic environment where people got fired or berated or whatever, and then how do you get them to open up?
It's not always easy. Place, right? I think sometimes when we have a new leader that comes to us, they'll watch the interaction of me and my leadership team, and I know for a fact they'll think, oh man, is this really real or is it not real? My general counsel and I, we go toe to toe in meetings where we really are, having to get to the right place, and we don't, we may not agree all the time, and when people who aren't used to leaders challenging each other, and certainly aren't used to leaders of a team challenging their leader, right? It can be really, it can throw you off. And I think that it takes people sometimes a little bit to get used to our style here. But I'll tell you what, I think anybody would tell you it's authentic. and we'll have those conversations respectfully. But with every one of my VP level leaders and above has been in rooms where we have some real difficult conversations some days. But you know what? I don't have time for games. Like there's so much to do. There's so many big decisions to make. Our charge to the community is so great that I don't have time to waste. And so for me, I'm looking for the quickest path to a solution. Right? Let's put our cards on the table and let's figure out what we got, where we got to go, because our community is depending upon us. I take that responsibility very seriously.
Does the quickest path to a solution ever cause you problems?
Sometimes. I mean, I'm not quick to the point where I'm irresponsible necessarily, but I have to constantly make sure that I haven't downplayed a perspective or forced a solution when there was still work to do to make sure to validate that that's the right answer, which is why me and my lawyer go toe to toe from time to time. I've got accountability partners on my leadership team that say, hey, Rudy, we need to really think about this, and at least do a little bit more math before we get there. But I push the organization, because an organization like CPS Energy inherently is slow to act just because we've got 3,600 employees. So we're never going to move as fast as I want to move, but we can move faster. And it's my job to figure out kind of how, where is the breaking point? Like how hard can I push the organization until I kind of get there? And we're not there yet, but I think we've made a lot of progress.
Have you ever had somebody come in and just say, hey, boss, I think we really need to slow this one down?
Yeah, absolutely. Happens every day.
Yeah.
And in those moments, guess what? I got to be humble enough to recognize, hey, I got to listen to my team. I'll tell you, one of the things that we have done a better job at over my 4 years now that I've been in this role is we have pushed decision-making authority down into the organization. Any leader will allow the highest leader in the organization to take on all the risk and make every decision if they want to do that. My goal is I want the lowest level of the organization making a decision, and then we'll validate it through the proper channels to make sure it's the right decision so that our leaders feel supported.
That reminded me of a question I was going to ask you toward the beginning of the podcast. As you were coming up, in the internship, coming up through the ranks, did you have bosses that took a risk on letting you make decisions?
Absolutely. So the leader, I'll tell you a funny story. There's a leader by the name of Steve Hool, who is VP of Rates and Regulatory Affairs for TXU, largest electric utility in the state of Texas. At that time, I was in Dallas at the corporate headquarters. And Steve, after a little, it was funny. I came, somebody said, hey, Steve Hool wants to meet you. We've got this position open that he wants you to think about. And, and I was just, some analyst, I didn't have, many skins in the wall back in those days. So I show up in his office and we have a great conversation. I was nervous as hell. About 20 minutes into the conversation, he goes, all right, interview's over. You want the job or not? And I didn't really even know I was interviewing for the job. I knew he had a job, but he made a really quick, call on me and decided he wanted me to be part of his organization. Well, when he brought me into the organization, he put me on some really big, cases at the PUC, and in one case in particular, it was a really politically charged case, and he let me run with it. And it was kind of in those moments of teaching where I got comfortable making decisions. Now, of course, the checks and balances have to be right, and you got to make sure you're not cowboying out on your own. But when you feel supported like that, and you're thoughtful about the decisions that you're making, 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to make the right decision. And he gave me the opportunity to learn that by putting me on some really big projects.
I remember one of my first bosses, I was early 20s, and he asked me a question. I said, well, I started to turn around and walk out, and he said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to go get the answer. And he said, well, just guess. And I said, well, I'd rather, give me an hour and I'll get you. He says, your guess is better than most people's analysis. Trust yourself.
Yeah, that's right.
And that one little moment of belief and a challenge, right? Get me out of my comfort zone, greatly shaped, as I was willing to take. It was just that one little line, where this guy goes, do you want the job or not?
Yeah.
20 minutes, and then gives you the opportunity. But I think it takes so many people I think people get stuck in leadership and can't grow because it's hard for them to trust their people or take the risk.
Agreed.
Right? Give the people an opportunity to fail. Yeah. I had a team recently where I said, hey, we're just going to fail forward fast.
Right.
Like I'm not looking for perfection. We just got to get this done.
If you fail and you learn something in the process, then that could be a positive outcome too. I mean, that's creating an environment for our leaders. When I'm pushing accountability down, I can't hammer them if they make the wrong decision. We got to work on alignment. We got to make sure they understand what it is we're trying to accomplish, how we're going to get there. But if they do something a way that maybe I wouldn't have done it that way, but we get to the right answer, then I got to be comfortable letting them do it their way. And most leaders have struggled with that, right? I mean, most leaders, all the leadership books out there, most leaders are operating at a level or two below what they're actually responsible for. And what we're trying to do here is coach people up. I want my VPs operating at the VP level, and I can see it immediately. The longer you're a CEO, the easier the observations become. And I can tell if somebody's operating at a director level. I can tell if a director is operating at a manager or individual contributor level. I know when my directors are getting too far into the weeds that they're not staying strategic. And so my chiefs, and so it's that's the job of a CEO. Is you got to understand, is everybody operating at the right level, and our decisions happening at the level they should be made at, and we're getting better and better at that every day.
I have one or two questions, and we'll bring this to a close.
Sure.
What's your hope for future leaders, based on where we're at today? World's a crazy place, getting crazier.
Great question. Leaders have to be authentic. I tell people, don't get a great opportunity and then do it the way you think, they expect you to do it, because that's what's going to keep you safe. Like, I don't worry about, whether or not tomorrow I'm going to be good. I'm making the best decision I can in the moment in an authentic way. Leaders have to take risk. There's no riskless leadership position. Every day, my 3,600 employees are doing things that any one of which could get me fired, under certain circumstances. That's the job. So how am I going to let that hold me back from, making the decisions and being bold and taking calculated risks in a way that's going to help move the organization forward? That's what I want my leaders, all of my leaders, inside and outside the organization. If you are a leader of people, man, don't you want to be bold? Don't you want to push the envelope to see how far, how much authority you can take on, and how that might help the organization, and what opportunities down the road that might lead to? I've always been a fairly aggressive-minded, person, aggressive-minded leader. I brought that into every leadership role I've stepped into, where, maybe I have gotten my hand slapped a couple of times because I pushed it, too far. But once I got into the CEO role, it's funny, your mindset changes, and you see these things in a much clearer, way, and you know what risk makes sense and what risk doesn't make sense. And if you trust your people, man, I've got a great leadership team. My leaders, they know they're all pulling in the same direction for the most part. They understand what we're trying to accomplish. I think they respect me. I think we enjoy working, together. And because of that, we're knocking down walls one after the other. And they're big walls, right? So I guess my advice for any leader is, don't get in a big job and play it safe. take some risks. It's okay if you fail, be transparent. I mean, the great thing about the things that we're doing here is they're informed by two things, our employees and our customers. The strategies that we've put in place that have gotten us so far down the road on the list of accomplishments that we have is because we've been communicative with our stakeholders. Mm-hmm. That is number one to an organization being successful are the people who care about whatever it is that you do on board with how you're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's good. As we wrap up here, you're a man of faith. How does that play into this whole thing? Public company, government, influence, all this. How's that?
Yeah, I think you can be a great leader and a good person at the same time. Mm. I mean, how horrible would it be for my employees to think I'm a great leader, but I'm a horrible person, or that I don't care about them? My team will tell you, I got 3,600 employees. I bet you I know at least 50% of them by name.
Wow.
I bet you that I know a good majority of their wives and their kids, and because I work hard at getting to know people on a personal level. That's all faith. It can't be all business all the time. I mean, don't you want to come to work and know that people care about your mental well-being as much as they care about your productivity? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a faith thing for me. I mean, people. I mean, when I first started, a lot of folks uncomfortable when I tell people God bless you, but I mean it. Whether you want to be blessed or not, you're going to get that from me. In the moments where I think it's appropriate. Mm-hmm. One of the, I've suffered through losing an employee. Here at CPS Energy. Honestly, I think my faith led me here to that moment to help the organization through it. Mm-hmm. Not easy, hardest thing I've ever dealt with as a leader. But again, as a man of faith, that I felt like I was at this place at that time for that reason. Mm. And so I think for people whose faith is strong, I think they appreciate that about me. And even if they're not, I hope folks would think that I'm generally a good person, because I try really hard to be, because I don't think you have to be a jerk to be a great CEO. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I think that's what a lot of CEOs think is necessary, mm-hmm. that they got to be some shark and, just mistreat people, and leave a path of destruction behind them because they're the big bad CEO. Man, I don't think like that. Just another guy who happened to get to this place, and I'm trying to do the best job I can.
Yeah, that's actually goes back to authenticity, right?
Yeah.
You have to be authentic. If you're a person of faith, that's got to show up somewhere.
Right.
Otherwise, you're not being authentic. Right. Which is counterproductive. Right.
I'm still that same guy who grew up in that 800 square foot house with no air conditioning. Like, I own that house today, my grandmother's house. So, I would move back.
Does it have air conditioning today?
It does now. Okay. Window units. Well, it doesn't have central air, but it has window units. But you know what? I could move back in that house tomorrow, and I would be completely happy. Mm. I don't make decisions based on material things. I'm just trying to be a good person. I'm trying to do a good job.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Rudy, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of A Leader's Journey podcast. If you enjoyed it, give us a thumbs up and remember to subscribe to our channel.